All right, in this video, I'm going to talk about the best practice for SDRs. I've actually started my career as an SDR 8 odd years ago. Since then, I've done a career in tech, closing over 3 million in contracts. The reason I'm doing this video is because my company operates as a sales outsourcing agency, and we've got 12 SDRs today. I see a lot of the challenges and best practice are not known before we hire people. And so this is my attempt at paying it forward and telling you some of the best practice I've learned making well over 20,000 cold calls in my career. So the first thing is work with a script for your niche. One of the things I've learned is that you don't need to know everything. A lot of SDRs are getting overwhelmed. They try to know the product by heart. They try to know every feature. They want to see product demos. They want to be the expert, but actually you don't need to. What you really need to do is have a well-crafted script that you learn by heart, which you can almost recite in your sleep. You want to be able to hit every single point that's important. You want a good intro, a good impact statement, set a buying atmosphere, high-level questions linked to more specific ones that uncover a need linked to your solution, product, or software, and closing questions to set up the next step, right? Practice it until it feels natural, until you don't sound robotic and you have tonality when you talk to prospects. The second thing is you need to have an objection handling manual ready. You need to have this manual ready for common objections. I don't have time. I'm in a meeting. We don't have a budget. Because it's a make or break situation where if you don't handle these objections, your conversion ratio is just going to be abysmal. And we're seeing it with clients. We have discussions with organizations where they say, my team flounders past, I'm in a meeting or send me an email, and they don't know how to rebound from there. They just completely lose it. But what we see is that the top performers handle these situations. It's like a reflex. They know exactly what to say and how to say it. It's not a silver bullet, but more often than not, they do end up booking the meeting because they were able to overcome that objection. This is going to make the difference between being an average performer and being a top performer. It's also going to 2x or 3x, and we've measured it at my company, your results and commissions if you're able to handle these objections in a really good way. The next thing is have 200 qualified leads with clean data, phone, emails, etc. lined up for the week. You should not start your week without 200 qualified leads. By that, I'm talking about contact data, which could be spread out around 30 companies, 50 companies, 100 companies. It really depends on what segment you're working on. Bottom line is you should have a clean list every Monday, 9 a.m. when you get to work, you're having your first coffee, you're about to hit the phones. This list should be as clean as possible. You're only as good as your list is one of the things I've been taught my first year in sales, and you've probably heard it before. That number will probably drop at the end of the week to 120 due to incorrect data, unreachable contacts. You've talked to people, you've qualified, disqualified, meetings booked. So you need to fill the gap with new leads the next week to ensure that you're always working with a full list. The next thing is a little tip, is flipping the lead. With my colleagues, we noticed that I might not vibe with a prospect, but my colleague would. It's just a personality thing where I'm calling, I have my style, and it just doesn't vibe. And the person on the other end feels like I don't want to engage with a salesperson. But I would flip the lead to a colleague and she would call and they'd be best buddies and she'd be like, sure, I'm going to buy. It's something I've learned in B2B sales. It's about companies buying from companies, but it's also human buying from human. And sometimes you just need to flip the lead because you're not vibing with the person you're talking to. Email warm-ups before calls. I've learned that emails and LinkedIn are not magic bullets, but they can warm up leads because what I learned is that emails and LinkedIn can warm up leads, but no executive in their right minds, unless I've never heard of it, is going to buy a software, for example, for 100 grand or 10 grand or 20 grand or 30 grand off an email, right? The cold email you'd send and they'd be like replying, yeah, sure, I'm going to buy. I need to buy it tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. They buy after multiple conversations. They buy after engagement. They're going to ask questions in meetings, on calls. So just pick up the phone, speed up the process, get in front of them, talk to them, see if it's relevant or not, and just move on. Don't hide behind emails and LinkedIn. I know there is a lot of hype with AI and all that stuff. There are people who would go on LinkedIn and be like, here's the magic formula on how I booked 250 meetings, sending 2 emails and 5 LinkedIn messages. Yeah, great. It sells courses. It sounds appealing because you're going to feel like, oh, I can get great results with minimal input, minimum work, and minimum work ethic. But to be honest, you're a salesperson, and if you want to be a great one, you need to be on the phone as much as possible. It's really a muscle and something you need to know that would compound into a great career and great money for you in sales. The number of dials, I'd dial at least 50 dials a day minimum, if not double if I were you. I don't want to be an hypocrite. Like, I wasn't the guy doing the most dials in my career. That's why I had to go and fish for bigger deals. But the metrics are clear. With switchboard calls, you should aim for 1 in 12 connection ratio, meaning you're going to call 12 switchboards, and 1 in 12, you're going to get connected to the decision maker. If you're watching this from the US or you're watching this from the UK and you're like, what are you talking about? This is for continental Europe, right? If you're in the UK, that ratio might be higher. If you're in the US, what are you doing calling switchboards? It's going to be very hard to get through. It's just super hard. Direct lines or mobile numbers, I found that the ratio is somewhere around 1 in 10 at worst, and all the way to 1 in 5 at best. Again, these are numbers for Europe, and that's the numbers also going to vary from SMB to enterprise. We're going to vary if you're in the US or in the UK watching this. There's no perfect metrics, but that should give you a benchmark. If you're in the US, it might drop to 3 to 4% of the people you're going to call that are going to pick up the phone. So if you call 100 people, you're going to get 3 or 4 conversations. Just measure what you've done, measure that connect rate, how many conversations you had, how many calls you made, measure all of that week to week, and make sure that you adapt your numbers to what target you need to reach. Another thing is, I saw a lot of colleagues spend a lot of time, and I was guilty of it too a few times, and then I picked up the good habit to do it on weekends. I'm not saying you should work on weekends. I'm saying you can work on weekends. It's entirely up to you. I certainly did on Sundays. I would build my list. So I would do my admin task, list building my list, cleaning the data. I did it outside of a 9 to 5. I did it basically on weekends. I know a lot of people take Friday afternoon to do that for the next week, or they say Monday is not a good day for calling, which every day is a good day, but they just take time off calling hours to do the list. I don't think it's a good idea. If you're like me, making lists basically makes me tired. It makes me a bit numb because I'm copy pasting data. So I wouldn't do that during working hours. If your organization isn't providing you a list of leads or contacts, go to your management and be like, can we work on this? Because you're probably more valuable on the phone versus copy pasting data in the CRM. Even if the company provides you leads, take responsibility. Don't come and cry because 10% of the data isn't correct. Just book yourself 1 or 2 hours to go through that data and correct it, to then make the adjustments necessary to get the results. Log every conversation in the CRM. If it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. No entry means no bonus or commission. Internal discussion about prospect should always be logged, at least as a comment in the CRM or as a note. Put as much as you can. I'm not even talking about what's in it for the company, that, oh, but then they can replace me with someone else and they can go, oh, it's just in case of holidays or parental leave. It's for you. What if you called someone 3 months ago? You had a very insightful conversation. They gave you a lot of data points and information that you should 100% leverage to reach back. And you missed it because you didn't write it down, and there is no way you will remember all of that after the number of conversations you should be having. You reach back 3 months from then and you're like, hi, nice to meet you. And we met a month ago. And you're like, oh, okay, great. And I told you we don't have budget until next month. Like, why are you calling me now? And then just sound like a fool, basically. You break trust. You're not paying attention. You're showing them you don't know what you're doing. It's just not good. Don't do it for the company. Don't do it for, I was going to say for the prospect, but do it for them, because at the end of the day, it's going to benefit you to log into the CRM. If you have automatic logging and transcripts like we do in our CRM, but if you don't, take the time to leave some notes, revisit it, at least the most important stuff, so that you can go back to it. And today there are so many tools to record and transcribe that go to management and try to see if they can do something about it. Prioritize inbound leads. Stats shows that if you reach out to an inbound lead within 5 minutes, your chances of closing the deal increases significantly. So always prioritize these hot leads. You might be thinking most of the stats on the internet, like I do, are crap or basically not right. I do think that, especially in sales, people just made up stats. 80% convert after 12 touches. Really? Who measured it? When? How? Sure, following up makes sense, and you should follow up many times, but who made that stat? Nobody knows. The one on the inbound leads, just to get back to that, I did notice that when I called a lead within 5 minutes of them being an inbound, I'd be like, hey, I'm Alex calling from XYZ. Like, oh, hi, like almost surprised. Oh, wow, already? Okay, cool. And then the conversation would be like, hey, you just inquired, just curious, what made you inquire? And they just give me so much insights about the project and where they're at and what they're looking for and who are the competitors and all that stuff, because it's fresh in their heads. But if I read them like 48 hours later, they've been through like 20 meetings. They don't even remember precisely why they outreach in the first place. They're like, which company is it again? I reached out to a bunch of companies. That's what happens when you don't reach out super fast. You need to be proactive and reactive when it comes to inbound leads to maximize your efficiency, because the insights you're going to get on this first call and the discovery are going to determine how you're going to place yourself against competitors to win that deal. Something driving me nuts, if you're an SDR and you paid basically on results, on meeting executed, why don't you confirm your appointments? Why don't you make sure the person shows up? Is this false sense of accomplishment when we've booked the meeting? Oh, it's going to happen. A lot of meetings end up in a no-show, especially since COVID. That tendency has been going up. So you're going to see that 60 to 80% of your meetings will show up. We manage through some techniques, which includes confirming the appointment 24 hours before to reduce that number to maybe 10%. But you really need to do it. If you don't do it, you're just not going to make it. Then the 8 to 12 touch point rules. There is this idea, and I don't know where it's coming from, that you need 8 to 12 touch points to move a prospect toward any kind of action. You should send emails, calls, LinkedIn, very outreach to reach someone and get them in. The key question is, how quickly can you make those touches in a way that feels creative? Because you don't want to be making people feel like you harass them. That's very important. You need to respect buyers on the other end. It's their job to purchase solutions, to take meetings, to talk to you and book meetings if it's relevant. But it's also not their job to take 30 calls in a day and be like, what the hell? Who's harassing me? Who's in the hospital? What's going on? You need to have this perfect balance between reaching out enough and not falling into not enough. You need to be persistent yet polite and creative. And, hey, nudging you. Hey, what about that? What about this? You need to find ways to bring value. I'll do a dedicated video on these follow-ups to be creative yet persistent in a way that people appreciate, showing you some concrete examples of what I've done, not a year ago, not 10 years ago, but literally like a week ago, a day ago, on how I drove success by doing these kind of follow-ups. So watch out for the next video on the topic, which I will link in the description below anyway. Leverage inside information. A lot of time you're gonna get insights into the company strategy, what's going on, and so you can use that information. If it's in the CRM, going back to that, in the next call to the other executives in the same company, you can make it part of your impact statement and pitch them, and they're gonna feel like you already have a lot of inside information. They're gonna feel like you're very well informed, right? So if somebody says, oh, we're gonna get acquired next year, it's a secret, but it's in the works, so your solution can be a good fit in 6 months. You can call another executive and be like, hey, John, I'm calling you because I heard your company might be acquired in the next 6 months. You're probably aware because where you sit on the executive committee. Anyway, the reason I was calling is because companies that get acquired usually have problem 1, 2, 3. Does that resonate with you in any way? You're more likely to land because you're like, oh, how does that guy know? Like, he must be connected inside the company. And you might get more information and more buy-in, and maybe that's the person who's gonna take the meeting with you. So leverage that information. Just don't stop and be like, okay, he said no, let's move on. Use that info. Focus on decision makers. I would only reach out to executives because a lot of people are going after people who don't have responsibility for purchase. It's not about being junior or job titles. The bottom line is, who's responsible for approving budget on this kind of purchase? Who owns the pain of the solution you're pitching? You want to go after these people. Don't call a manager if you can call a director. Don't call a director if you can call a head of. Don't call a head of if you can call a VP. The only exception is you need more insights before you call the big guy with a very tailored pitch. You're working a bottom-up situation. But if you just call like the officer of a manager and be like, oh yeah, it's my boss's boss who decides, just send me some information, I'm gonna see what I can do, the odds is gonna go through or close to zero. In my experience, the conversion ratios are horrible on that stuff. You need to research and reach out to the big boss right away yourself and deliver the pitch. And if a pitch doesn't land on a regular basis, you need to rework your pitch to land these executives directly. It's gonna speed up things. You're gonna get better responses. You're gonna get to a yes or a no. Because the bottom line is, and that's a very important concept, if you call too low and the person is not responsible for buying, they can tell you no, but they can't tell you yes. If you call an executive in charge of a budget, they can say yes or they can say no. If you call too low in the organization, they can only say no, they can't say yes, they have to ask permission for yes. Very important to remember. So don't waste your time with people who can't say yes. Go straight to the person who can and have a pitch that's tailored to them so that you get faster to yes or no. Maximize your time on the phone. That one is not going to sit well with a lot of LinkedIn posts I'm seeing lately, where SDR should be brand ambassadors and they should be posting on LinkedIn and doing this and that. Yeah, sure, do that stuff. But honestly, maximize your time on the phone, especially during working hours. It still works despite all the LinkedIn posts I'm seeing. It works. Every time I see outbound is dead or cold calling is dead, I open a dashboard. I'm like, it's not so dead. It's going pretty well for us. It's one of the best channels to book qualified meetings, honestly, and to engage with executives. So even if you generate a lead via email or LinkedIn, you should always follow up with a phone call, because you can also run any kind of framework of qualification. I personally like BANT or MEDPIC or MEDIC, depending on what you learned. BANT stands for Budget, Authority, Needs, and Timing. I did a dedicated video on the topic you can watch, where I talk about qualifying leads and why it's important to qualify people on the phone before handing it over to your colleague. The real value is delivered once the meeting takes place and net revenue is created. You need cash in the bank to be created, even if you're not responsible for closing. That's the ultimate goal. So send people who can buy, right? That's the bottom line. Sending people who can buy. You might also become an account executive or other things. You want to start thinking like an owner. You want to start thinking like a salesperson, not just be somebody who's prospecting, and you want to align with the rest of the organization on generating revenue. Training and upskilling. I see too many people not training who've never been trained. For me, the more skill you become, the more leverage you gain. This is the ultimate game in sales. For instance, if you're converting 1 out of every 10 calls, upskilling could get you to 3 out of 10 calls. It's 3 times the pay for the same amount of effort, the same amount of hours, the same amount of calls you're making, the same amount of rejection. I know it's hard, but if you upskill, it gets easier and you get more used to it. At some point, you start making uncommon money compared to the rest of your family or even people who've been 30 years in other careers. It really is an accelerator if you treat it that way and you do it well. Make as many repetitions as you can so you can train every day to make small adjustments and improve. Over time, these small changes will compound and make you hyper efficient. If you're on my team, if you're profitable, just reach out to me. We've got this platform powered by AI, which you can train for free, which is going to make you do repetitions outside of the field. So you don't waste leads, you don't waste good buyers. You basically train on AI and it's giving you feedback so you can make these repetitions and get the right reflexes on the field to increase that conversion ratio and get more commissions. You shouldn't be thinking when you get an objection. You have half a second to answer. It should go out automatically. You should be drilled on it. You should be learning from every call. You should be reading books. You should be looking for information to improve your skills because it's going to compound over time. Don't expect that you do training for a week and then, oh, I'm not a millionaire yet. That's not how it works. Give it months, give it years, but it's going to work if you do it. If you don't do it, it's never going to compound. You're never going to make it. It's like hitting the gym. If you never go to the gym because you've been once and you're not Mr. Universe or Miss Universe yet, guess what? It's going to take more time than that. You absolutely need to go to the gym a few times a week for a very long time, maybe every day for a week. And so you need to start thinking about the same thing about sales. It's a sport. You need to practice it and you need to repeat the conversations as often as you can and as long as you can. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I see a lot of reps who are afraid to appear uninformed or look like idiots. It's better, like one VP of sales told me, it's better to sound like an idiot for a minute than to be ignorant for a lifetime. It's better to have somebody to be like, hey, sorry, you just mentioned this. I feel like I should know that, but I don't. Could you walk me through that? It's better to say this for a few calls, and then the 5th call, you're like, hey, what about this and that? And you have inside information. Oh, do you work next to me? Have you been 20 years in this career? It's better to play the long game and invest in loss and just admit than to try to pretend that you know everything and the people in front of you can see right through that. You're going to lose credibility and trust, and you're never going to get where you want to go in your sales career, not to the extent that you want to go to. You're here to find problems, not pitch solutions. Your goal is to find problems that your solution can address. A cold call is not made to sell the solution. Nobody's going to buy after a 2-minute cold call, not for a 10 grand plus purchase anyway. You need to set a meeting. That's the next step. So you need to find a problem that your solution can solve, and you need to sell the next step, which is the meeting. One of the best things I've heard from a CRO recently I worked with in the US, he used to be a Marine, and I heard this expression from him that was very interesting. He said, it's better to sweat in training than to bleed in battle. I like that saying, even though it's very army stuff, and I'm not comparing sales with military, it's wildly different. But I like this saying applied to sales because The training should be harder than the field. So when you get on the phone with prospects, you're so ready that the only outcome is success. Make sure you train, make sure you do your reps, make sure you do what it takes to become a top performer, because it pays a lot of money. Honestly, it's one of the best career sales with uncapped possibility. But you're gonna get there with skills, because people then are gonna trust you with bigger deals, bigger responsibilities, with bigger accounts, and you're gonna get that leverage for your skills to make more money for yourself. I love sales. I'm a huge fan of B2B sales. Feel free to watch the next videos. I'm going to do more videos on this theme so that you can get some ideas around upskilling. Despite the number of content out there, I found very few content that tackles these issues. So I'm going to be posting more about this stuff. Look in the description for the link. You can join our free training workspace where me and the team train every single day. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video if you liked it, so that other people can benefit from it and possibly come and train with us as well. See you in the next video.